bundle of joy for your parents, for you maybe a wishful thought? Well, 20 years ago, in the Balkan region was the worst genocide since World War II. According to History.com, Bosnia-Herzegovina declared independence from the Serbian-led Yugoslavian state in April 1992. This led to the slaughter of over 100,000 people, 80% of them being Bosnian. The massacre of the Muslim Bosnians, known as Bosniaks, ended in 1995. Semenia, a member of the International Commission of Missing Persons Sarajevo, says that there are 2 million refugees displaced all over the world. I have been to Bosnia and I have been to Serbia. I have seen the bullet holes and I have felt the holes where the mortar hit. Learning about the Bosnian genocide will teach you more about war, genocide, and the atrocities that happen in history. First, I will shed light on the history of Yugoslavia, then the separation of the Balkan states, how the Bosnians were killed, the systems that failed them, and the aftermath. According to Maston, a research associate, Marshal Tito started a communist regime in World War II to expel the Nazis from the Balkan region. He then started the Communist People's Republic of Yugoslavia after the fall of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. The Yugoslavia consisted of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro. After the fall of the USSR in 1991, communism took a massive hit, which led to the dissolution and the disbanding of Serbian-led Yugoslavia. According to the Houston Genocide Museum, Croatia, Macedonia, and Slovenia were the first ones to leave Yugoslavia, which started a violent retribution, but it was also short as well. When Bosnia-Herzegovina followed suit and tried to emancipate from Serbian-led Yugoslavia, they were met with the same hesitation. Serbia invaded Bosnia-Herzegovina under the guise of removing their Serbian Bosnians, but instead they used it to ethnically cleanse the entire region. According to Maston in 2013, she outlines what exactly happened for the Serbians' plan of attack. First was concentration, then decapitation, separation, evacuation, and liquidation. First came concentration, which was when the Serbian troops came into the Bosnian region to remove the Serbian Bosniaks from the area safely. They then rained down on these towns with mortars and bullets. Then came decapitation. They killed the leaders, they killed people of intelligence, of power, anyone really who posed a threat. Separation was when they separated the men from the women from the children. Evacuation was when they moved the men of fighting age to certain areas and women and children to others. Liquidation may be hard to hear for some people, so if you are sensitive towards graphic topics, please tune out for the next sentence. Liquidation was the mass rape of a lot of women to breed out the Bosniaks completely. They were tortured. The men were slaughtered. The few who escaped the roundup were killed along the paths to the safe areas because they were narrow and easy for the Serbian horses to get them. The UN declined to label what happened a genocide because that meant that they didn't have to intervene at all. The Peace Pledge Union information explains that the 6 refuge areas set up by the UN were either ethnically cleansed almost straight away, or the Serbians used them to their advantage to predict the Bosniaks' movements to kill them on their paths. The Dutch UN commanders were ill-equipped, without backup, and small in number. This led to them being overpowered very quickly. The Global Security recorded that NATO issued a no-fly zone over the conflict zone, but there was little help from outside countries and outside forces. Imogen reports did finally reach the western areas, and there was a massive public outcry over all the atrocities that were happening, and a lot of people put pressure on the government to intervene. But instead, the governments just addressed the public emotions rather than actually going over there and trying to solve the problem with force or by negotiation. August 1995 marked the beginning of the end of the conflict. NATO joined forces with the Bosniaks and the Croatian Bosnians, and they had 3 weeks of raining down on the Serbian forces to help repel them from the area. A peace treaty was reached 3 months later in November in Dayton, Ohio. The Bosnian population was 4.4 million initially, with 2 million of those people becoming internally and externally displaced. The International Commission for Missing Persons found that following the peace treaty, there are a lot of human rights being violated continuously. So a lot of people, if they wanted to come home, couldn't come home for their own safety. Even now, there are still 500,000 Bosnians overseas in refugee areas on temporary visas unable to come home. According to a report done by Congress, in 1993, the UN requested that there was a criminal tribunal for former Yugoslavia to be erected. Due to a lack of monetary resources and people, it took a really long time for it to be set up. This led to the prosecution and the witness gathering and everything taking a really long time, decades. Even now, people are still going through the court process to be tried for war crimes that they committed. A report was requested by the UN and on the war crimes that happened in 1992, and that alone was 3,000 pages long. The Peace Preventative Inquisition found that in 1999, the UN did their own inquisition into what happened, and they found that the Bosnian genocide was easily prevented with intervention, with many Bosniaks asking and crying out for the UN commanders to be tried for their abandonment. Since 1994, the International Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia has indicted 161 people, with 20 of those currently going through the court system, 18 have been acquitted, and 74 have been arrested and sentenced. In conclusion, it's important to remember the crimes of our past so that we can stop them from happening again and again and again. The Bosnian genocide was an example of a foreseeable and preventable genocide. First, I shared the history of Yugoslavia, the dissolution of the Balkan countries, what happened overseas, the murder of them all, and the disappointing effects that followed on. According to the Peace Preventative Information, there are still 20,000 Bosnians listed as missing today.